Welcome to another episode of Founders Club. Today, I'm very excited to be talking to Matt Laricy, the founder of the Laricy Real Estate Team and the #1 realtor in Chicago. He has personally, him and his team, done over 7,000 transactions, and very excited to be talking to him today about how we can grow our businesses and become better at what we do in the field of real estate. As always, check out the links in the description below. And if you like money, you like real estate, hit that subscribe button and we'll see you on the inside.
Welcome to Founders Club, the show for real estate entrepreneurs.
Matt, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, excited to dive in with you. But I guess a good place to start would just be kind of how things are going for you now and kind of how you became the #1, realtor in Chicago.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a third generation agent, been around the business my whole life. So since I was like 2 years old, that's all I ever wanted to do. When I graduated college, I was already licensed. And I started selling literally that day. And when I quote unquote hung up my license, I figured this would be a very easy feat and then I would rise to the top extremely quickly. And I was pretty wrong on that. And in my first 4 years, I made about $17,000 total in my first 4 years. And that was, I got in at the end of 2006. So in my market, 7 was like a good year, but I also I don't know what the hell I was doing. So I didn't do anything. And then 8 happened and we all know what happened then. And then, so by 2009, I started questioning what I was doing with my life. So it was a rough beginnings, we'll say. So getting to the top wasn't an easy feat. My family was selling mostly on the south side of Chicago, so it's more of a blue collar neighborhood. And my dream was to sell downtown in the glitzy, big high-rise area. So it was a big transition to get to the top.
Wow. Okay. So third generation, kind of thought you'd hit the ground on the springboard and go straight to the top, but sounds like it was a little bit of a rocky road. So what was
I think when I hit the springboard snapped and I fell into the pool. So there was no good start for me. It was rocky road's an understatement.
So then let's talk about what changed. What is it that you changed either in yourself or in your business to start seeing the growth, the upward trajectory?
I'm a winner. First and foremost, I believe in myself above all. That sounds terrible, but that's the reality of life. Is if you look at any of the people who are the most successful, most people didn't have people that believe in them. They only believe in themselves, and you have to be kind of like your own biggest cheerleader because nobody's going to root for you. And then when you get to the top, everybody roots for you, of course. But essentially, I always knew no matter what, that if I worked hard enough, I could get anywhere. So that's kind of the mentality I had going into it. So although my first 4 years I wanted to quit and give up, I also knew that, there was a saying my dad used to always have is that you get out of it what you put into it. So I knew that if I kept going, that I would eventually get lucky. So I was always a very consistent and routine driven person. And I took advantage of any situation I could. So give me an example, in 2008, when I decided to take the company downtown, I didn't know the market. So I studied the market. I would walk the neighborhoods and try to map out what areas were what and kind of teach them to myself so that I could become, an expert. And what I figured is I couldn't get rich in money, but I could get rich in knowledge. So when the market turned, I would be the smartest guy. So that's kind of my mentality of getting started. It's like the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. You just got to keep going at it. And eventually, you'll get more and more wins. I don't know if that makes sense to you, but.
No, it definitely makes sense. And I like that you said that it's because you're a winner and you believe in yourself, because I do think a big part of it is just having that mental game and the not giving upness and all the things that come along with that. And then what happened as you started?
But think about this though, when you say
building
that,
the business?
but when you think about that, is we're now all negative thinkers for the most part. And I think a lot of social media and stuff like that gives us more of a negative outlook, and we want to play the victim card. And I think that's why also, like, to stay at the top now is so much easier, because your competition is only thinking the negative side. Oh, the commission lawsuit came out. Oh, we're all going to be out of business. Oh, we're going to lose all this money. Oh, and they always look at the negative side, whereas like the positive side is like, we're going to cut the fat. I'm going to have less competition. I'm going to get richer. I'm going to have more opportunities at bats. More at bats I get, the more often I get on base. More often I get on base, more often I score. Right. So it's like, it's just having that mentality, and that's something, you can't teach. It's something you either earn or you don't. So, and I didn't mean to cut you off, but just kind of going off that thought.
No, I like that, and I couldn't agree more. And so, as you're starting to build, what is it that you were doing to start? Like, what's the biggest thing between then and now that has like impacted your business? Hey there, I just have a quick favor to ask. If you're getting value from Founders Club and you're watching on YouTube, just give us a like, hit that subscribe button. If you're listening on iTunes, leave us a 5-star review. These things are free to do, and it really helps the channel, and it also helps us be able to bring better guests for you in the future. Now back to the episode.
I think it's just came down to a lot of little wins at first. Like, what I started doing was, like, when I was getting going, I would use the paper to call by owners and stuff like that. And I would actually door knock to try to get listings. I saw forsalebyowners.coms. And honestly, the rejection to getting told no and F off, that actually kind of really built me up a lot more, right? Because that like, I think all of our biggest fears are rejection and getting told like they're nobody. And I think if I didn't learn that early on, I'd feel a lot more uncomfortable getting told no, So it's even a lot of the little stuff you can take away when things are so bad that actually builds you to who you are when you're successful. And those qualities make you maintain success. And one thing that I realized around 2008 was that the internet was a powerful tool, and most people weren't using the internet at that time. Okay. You got to remember, like, this was like, most people were still on flip phones. Okay. And
Right.
I figured that, I didn't have the money to build anything on my own. So what I did is I kind of reversed SEO things. So like at that time, like Realtor.com was a site, and there's other sites out there. And what I did is I started answering questions online. Anytime a question popped up on one of these sites, I would answer the question. So then I just figured if somebody at that time like Binged or Yahoo the question, like that answer, that thing may come up, and then my name would pop up. So it would self-generate, putting my name out there more. And then, websites came along like Zillow and these sites. And I'll never forget that I put my life savings on Zillow. It was 60605. And at that time it was like $5,000. And that was actually more money than I had in my bank account. And I figured that, I was either going to get a lead and be able to close it, or I would, fail and just going bankrupt. And I remember I got my first lead at 10 East Ontario. And I met the person and they bought it, and I, made that month back right away. And then I took the money I made from that and doubled up for the next month. And I really started creating that. And I won't forget that I went to a party one time. It was like a lender party, and all the top agents were in the corner. And I walked up to them and I said, what are you guys doing for advertising? They said, well, I'm on bus boards and CS magazines and, taking out, magazine ads. And I said, well, I invested my life savings online. And everybody laughed at me. And they said, that who's going to go online to search for homes? And that was a big, at this point, it sounds like, of course, everybody's going to. But you remember at that point, like, these sites were brand new, like these things weren't like they were coming. So I think my ability to take a chance on technology that everybody said would be wrong was a strength of mine. And since then, we were the first people to do, social media advertising. We're the first people to do like just close photos. First people to do podcasts, video tours. In fact, I remember in 2013 at our awards show, backstage, all the top realtors were like, is your production crew going to come here? Are they going to come here and film me? And everybody laughed at me and said, no, video is so stupid. And now it's like, everybody's doing video, right? But at the time, I looked like an idiot to the outsiders, but I was already creating a brand. So by the time like all these things took off, like in 16, like Zillow took off, and all the video stuff took off and social media took off, we were so far ahead of everybody that you couldn't even catch us. And then we were already moving on to the next thing where you're trying to figure out old technology. So that's kind of been like a big thing that I've always been able to embrace is like taking a chance and spending the money on new stuff and not caring what other people said or thought about me when I took that chance.
Yeah, no, I like that. I think two things I just heard right there is one, a lot of creativity, right? To go out and be on these online forums way before everybody else was, to be doing the video marketing way before everybody else was, podcasting, all that kind of stuff. Just being creative with it and leveraging it. I think that's a great way to get ahead. Like even now, there's always new things that are coming up, and just staying ahead of the curve with stuff like that. And then also, it sounds like you're taking some risks. You're willing to take the big swings. You're willing to put your money on the line, and I think that's a big part of it as well.
Well, you got to realize too is like you have to think creativity. So like you think about the fact that I remember in 2008, I took my first vacation with my girlfriend, who's now my wife, and we went to San Diego. And I'll never forget, she said that she wanted to go to get Italian food. I'm like, who wants to get Italian in San Diego? But so what I did at that time is again, I went on like Yahoo or Bing because Google wasn't like really a big thing. And a new website came up called Yelp, which of course now is a powerhouse, but back then it was like nothing. And I looked at the top 3 restaurants, and I picked the one I thought had the best menu, right? So that sounds pretty basic. But at that time, that was, not really an ordinary thing. And it gave me an idea when we were walking to dinner. I said, well, how many people are coming to Chicago that don't know any realtors, but would do exactly what we just did based off ratings, right? So what I did is I called my rep at Zillow and I called my rep at Trulia, who were 2 separate reps at that time, 2 different companies. And there was like 10 people total. And I said, why don't we do reviews for realtors? Like, why don't we try this out and get reviews? And they said, they were like, well, I don't know if people really want to see, like, as a service industry, the online ratings like that, et cetera. And I was like, well, do it with me. I'll do it, and I'll ask my clients for reviews. So, I was one of the first people to get beta tested to do online reviews on. And now I got like 1,700 of them online. And people were nervous at that point to put online reputation at the time out there, right? Because, 1-star review could crush your industry. But I was willing to do it because I figured, somebody out there might be coming from San Diego to Chicago, wants to buy a place, and they may just go online to find them, So I think a big thing is thinking outside the box. And like now when you say it, it sounds so basic, right? But some of the greatest ideas always come from like things that like, how come I didn't think about that,
Yeah, no, I love that. I love the Yelp example too. I think that's awesome, and that's interesting. So you were one of the first people getting Zillow reviews.
Yeah.
That's also putting your neck on the line.
Yeah. And at the time they called truly we were called recommendations, and then of course they consolidated over time. But so I think we've always had a knack of trying to like stay ahead of the curve on that front. But I think a big part of it comes down to routine. I think a lot of people out there, they want to be successful, but they don't have a routine, right? So like, it's really easy when you're first getting started and you have nothing on your calendar to just sleep in and hit the snooze button and say you'll get to it tomorrow, So I've always been a guy that works 7 days. I sleep 4 hours a night, and I've just always had that mentality. So even if I have nothing on my calendar, I still get up early, go to the gym, get done with it. I'm out by 6:30. I have the rest of the day ahead of me. So that way, if an opportunity comes, I'm already mentally focused to be able to take on that opportunity. But if I decided to sleep in and I'm going to the gym and I'm going to get lunch and then an opportunity comes in, I'm not mentally there. So I think that's a big problem that people have that, are trying to get successful. But the problem is they're not putting themselves in the opportunity to be successful.
I like that a lot. So one thing I heard there was routine, and I want to drill down on that a little bit because I do think that in our business, a lot of people, they don't treat it like a real job. Like you said, they'll sleep in, or if something comes up, they'll go do it. But if you treat it like you worked at IBM or a big corporate job, and you had a start time every day and an end time, and you kind of we're all in like that. But like, let's talk about like your routine and how you're coaching your agents on the power of that.
Yeah, I mean, I am like routine to the T. So I wake up at the same time. I go to bed. I wake up around like 4:30, 4:45 every day. I go to bed every day around like like anywhere from 11:30 to 12:30, depending on when I end up passing out. So I'm anywhere from 4 to 5 hours of sleep a night. And I do the same thing. I wake up. I go to the gym. Knock out some emails, and by like 8:15, I'm coming to the office or at the office or on the phone with somebody for something. And then, I can then, I do my lead follow-up first thing in the morning. And then after that, it's just whatever comes in and whatever else I have to do that day is, I have, I'm ready for it because, and at least for us, for as busy as we are, I can only have one appointment on the day, and by 9 a.m. I can have 20 appointments on the day. So it's really, really important to stick with that routine. And one of the things I do, and you can maybe see this behind me here on this side, this board right here, is what I keep up for my agents. And the last column over here is the days off column. So I count days off at my office. So I hold my agents accountable. So for the agents, you have to work 9 a.m. till 6 p.m. on Monday to Friday. So if you take off at 5:30, that's considered a half day. So you can start at 6 a.m. and get off at 5:30. That's still a half day. And then on the weekends, it's 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. Okay. And that includes holidays. Okay. So if you get to too many days off, you're automatically fired. And the way we operate is the fact is, like I tell them, it's like, I compare it to dieting. It's like people are like, well, I don't know how to gain weight. It's like, okay, well, like, you ate pizza this day, you had mayonnaise on your sandwich every day. It's like all these little things are what adds up to gain weight. And people don't understand it's a lot of the little things. So when you look back at the end of the year, you're like, well, I don't know why my sales aren't where they're at. I'm like, dude, you took off 40 days. It's at that dinner. And what people understand too is the fact that it's mental, right? If you have somebody who wants to see a place at 5 o'clock, but now you get a dinner with your friend at 6:30, you're mentally already trying to move that appointment without like coming out and doing it. So now you're not 100% yourself, right? Whereas if you didn't have that dinner that night, like you're going there no matter what, maybe they're buying it, etc. And you may say, well, that doesn't affect my life. It's like, well, you do that 20 times a year and 5 of those people buy and you pass on it. That might be an extra $20 million in sales a year, and that's what people don't understand. And that's why I count, holidays and things of that nature as well. And it's the same thing I talk about, with like, I've never been to a bachelor party before. Okay. And I always say I tell people this to my agents. I say, if you think about it, most of these things now are, they're 3 days away. It's going to cost you probably a minimum around, I don't know, 7,500, 10,000, let's say $10,000, right? So now I'm gone for that 3 days. And so I'm shut down. I'm not really myself because I'm not partying with my buddies. And then when I get back, you're usually hungover another day. So that's 4 days. You're really not yourself. And I break down $300 million a year in sales, break down my, 365 days. And you look at how many money I lost in those 4 days of not being me. And then how many at bats I lose for next year because all the referrals would have came in from those 4 days I took off. So that could cost me $100,000 to take off a weekend. So I say, okay, well, I spent $10,000 and I lost $100,000. So I spent $110,000 to go on a bachelor party. Is that worth it to you? To me at this point in my life, it's not. That's why I don't want to do it. And that's what I tell my agents is like, is it worth the cost of that? And then if they do go away for the weekend, I show them all the opportunities they could have had and say, listen, you could have had this many more buyers. This guy just bought a $1.5 million house, but you decided to go golfing today. Was that golf session worth $1.5 million sale? That's it.
Yeah. I love that. So tell me more about the whiteboard back there, because it looks like 4 or 5 columns. You said you're tracking days off. What else are you guys tracking?
We track how many listings you have. We track how many units you have under, or how many units you have under contract, what you have pending, and what you have closed.
Okay, and then what about are you tracking like contacts or prospecting or anything like that, or is it really just about contracts and listings?
Contracts and listings. Yeah.
That makes it
simple. And we have a whole follow-up system that we I explain to the agents a lot. I mean, we get a tremendous amount of online leads, like a tremendous amount, a couple hundred a month. So, and for somebody out there is like, oh, that's insane. It's like, you get a couple hundred online leads a month, like 50% of them are shit right off the bat. Okay. So like, you get 200, you're down to 100 right off, so let's be realistic of what we're really talking about. But, follow-up is key. To me, it's like the main reason between winners and losers in this business, a big one of them is follow-up. Follow-up is everything. We have a daily follow-up, and that goes for our listings too. See, in Chicago, unlike all the other, what I call amateur cities, we don't do lock boxes here. We have to be present in all showings, okay, for our listings. We carry over 100 listings at any given time. I have 8 agents total, including myself, okay? During busy season, we may have 50 showings in our listings. Plus, on average, we're taking out over 100 buyers. Like we have 100 active buyers at any given time. So when we talk about like being busy, like busy is like an understatement. Like it's not even like that's why it's so important not to take days off, because you have one or two options. I always tell people I can hire more people, you get less leads and less money, or we can keep our tap, or you're gonna be, running like a madman. So, those are the options we take. Like I compare my guys to like Navy SEALs. Like you gotta be in suit and tie. We have a dress code. You don't wear a suit and tie, you're automatically fired, just like automatic. Like there's no exceptions. So we look the part, we come, dressed in the top nines, and these guys know their stuff. Like there's minimum years requirement to work for us. You have to be working these certain hours and days. Like most people who know us in Chicago, like those guys are just fucking nuts. Like I don't want to, like that's too much, just too much. And I think the problem that I have with the industry is the fact that the barrier to enter for our industry is so low, which is why we got sued. And the fact that most people don't take the job seriously. They may be rich or have a good network. They get a couple big sales in the year. They're cool with making X amount, and that's good for them. And they hope to get lucky next year, and the phone keeps ringing. And that's just not the business we're trying to run here. We're not focused on, we want numbers. We want a lot of numbers, but we're not focused on, diluting our product to get there. We only want to be at the top surrounded by elites.
Yeah, no, that I think that goes back to the winner mindset, and I love what you said about kind of looking at it like a Navy SEAL. It really seems like you're all about that high performance level, from the dress code all the way back on down. What are some of those other non-negotiables that you guys have?
Undying loyalty. This industry is super backstabby, right? Everybody knows. Anybody who's ever had like good agents that work for them understand that, like, a lot of people will go whoever the highest bidder is, right?
Yeah.
So for us, what? We already talked about that. But now I lost my train of thought here. What were you just talking about? You threw me off. Oh yeah, loyalty, because like it's important to make sure that people that work with you are loyal to you, but it goes down to your culture, right? So like the culture has to be right. Like I'll pass on somebody if I don't get along with them. Like if I don't like somebody, I don't want them working here as well. We've had problems with other assistants and agents before where they just, they're always gossiping or talking shit about something, complaining, whining all the time. It's like you got to cut the snake off the head off the snake right when that happens. Poison in an office will spread fast. It'll spread long. It'll ruin your place. So, you got to dress the part. You got to take the day, not take the days off. You got to be loyal. You got to fit into the culture aspect of what we're going for. Have that same mentality. But I don't want any whiners or negative Nancy's or one of these people who are always the victim type cards, where it's always somebody else's fault why you mess up. Like if you fuck up, you're gonna get reamed out. And if you sit there and try to blame somebody else, that's it. Like you're gone. I don't second guess that. And on the flip side, when we mess up, when we get fired over something like that, and it is my agent's fault, then the client calls me up yelling at me. I'm not blaming John, saying, oh, that's John's fault. I'm saying it's myself, because ultimately I'm the boss. And it was up to me to train John good enough to make sure that John wasn't stupid enough to do that, right? So it's about taking accountability. And I can't stand people who won't take accountability. I always tell people how hard it is to yell at somebody when you're yelling at them and they're like, you're right, I did mess up. I'm sorry. I'm human. I made a mistake. I'm really, really sorry. It's like you want to keep yelling at them, but they're admitting they're wrong, and it's hard. What makes people more mad is when they're yelling at you and you're like, I didn't do it. It's this person's fault, blah, blah, because they know you're wrong. You may, I always say, take your licks and be done with it. It is what it is. And if you're too sensitive for that, well, you're not for us. That's what it is.
Love that. Yeah, I love the no nonsense attitude. I think that's really missing in the real estate world in general.
We're not going to win any PC awards. I'll tell you that right now. So, but ultimately, listen, to win at the level that we place at, like, you can't be anybody who's actually done this business. You can't be sensitive, because like the way people yell at you and talk to you, especially today post COVID, the way it is, the belittling we get from consumers and stuff. Like if you're sensitive to that or can't take it and yelled at, like you're not going to make it in the business anyways.
Yeah, definitely agree on that. So if you were, how many, you said there's 7 people on your team, 8 people on your team?
I got 8 agents, 4 assistants.
Okay. And how many homes do you guys sell a year average? What's your average?
500 is average.
500. That's pretty impressive for a team of 7.
Yeah.
And so how are you coaching your agents to generate business and stay hungry, stay motivated?
I mean, so like I would say that like I don't really like need to worry about like getting business for us is like easy. Like, and I know it sounds terrible, but like it's just I built over almost 20 years a brand that business will naturally come in. And with what we spend on online leads and stuff like that, business comes in. So I don't think it's about more or less, I don't really need the agents to generate business. And I think that's a big strength I have as a team lead is like, I don't depend on my agents for business. I'm producing myself. And I use my agents for time. So for me, I need their time to help the business I have. So that's the way I keep them motivated is like they also are motivated by being winners themselves. So it's like the more time you give me, the more leads you get, and the more leads you get, the more money you make. You know, if being the best and getting business doesn't motivate you, then this isn't the best fit for you, you know? And I like to surround myself with people who want to be number one. If you want to be number 2 or number 4 or number 10, great. Like not everybody wants to be the best like that. And I'm not knocking anybody out there that doesn't feel that way. And if you feel that way and think I'm a psychopath or that's how my mentality is, that's fine. You should think like that. But like the reality is like, I don't want that working at my company. And, you know, so I don't really feel like I need to motivate them. I need them to understand like, this is who we are as people. You know, motivation comes and goes, but determination stays, you know? And I compare myself.
Great.
Yeah.
That's a great soundbite right there.
Yeah. And I compare myself to Pat and I'm on the front lines at all times. I'm in the trenches with the troops. I'm not sitting there on the beach telling everybody to work really hard. So the fact that I'm here first thing and I leave after everybody every single day, 7 days a week, holidays included, you know, you can't sit there and get animosity towards me by saying, oh, Matt's making all the money, but he's sitting, you know, he's on vacation again. There he goes again, or he's going out with the kids again. You know, so that's what I love about excuses is that you can't make any excuse to me. I'm about to have my 4th kid. Don't tell me about kids and how, you know, much trouble you have or you're not sleeping at night. You can't one up me on that stuff. And that's the best part. And that's how I keep them motivated too, in the sense of them being like, oh, I have this or I have this. It's like, no, what do you mean you have to? Like, I love the saying when somebody says to me, I have to go to a wedding. What do you mean you have to go? Did I miss somebody holding a gun to your head? Like you're forced there to be there? Like you either want to go or you don't want to go. You know, like ultimately at the end of the day, you have to look yourself in the mirror and determine who do you want to be as a person? Do you want to be, you know, somebody's, you know, the best friend of, you know, a social butterfly, or do you want to be a, you know, a winner who succeeds in business? But that's ultimately what you have to decide. And I can't decide that for you. And I attract mentality that has mentality like me, but I have no patience for the other side of that.
So I think that when people hear this, and I'm sure you hear this all the time, they're going to think that that's pretty hardcore. And like, what about work-life balance? And what would your response be to something like that?
I think if you think about balance, I actually think you're a very weak individual. That's just my thought. That's my mentality. And people will get very upset when I say it, but it's just the truth. Go tell your grandpa that, you know, fought in World War II. Ask him about balance. Your grandpa will punch you in the face, like, what the hell are you talking? I fought in fucking World War II, dude. When you talk about balance, you know, like I worked, you know, 18 hours a day. I built houses. I got paid $50 a day. Like this balance is this new word that came in, you know, and just started like making up this stuff about how like we're all supposed to be living like the greatest lives in the world. Everybody's making $1 million, flying first class to Europe, but not going to work for it. It's just a bullshit thing that everybody tells themselves. And I know that like when I say this, everybody goes crazy and says I'm an asshole and blah, blah, blah. But that's the reality of life is that if you want to be successful, you can't have balance. How much balance do you think Elon Musk has or Bill Gates or Steve Jobs had? How many people that are actually at the top of their industry have balance? Nobody. It's just not, it's not possible. It's a thing that we tell ourselves. And balance is something that a lot of people tell themselves as an excuse of why they're not where they're at. Oh, well, I could have been there too, but I decided to have kids. So like, you know, it's all about balance, right? I just feel like it's an excuse word that people use to try to use as a coping mechanism to try to tell people why they're not where they're supposed to be at. And that's it. And I understand that's a terrible way to put it, but in my opinion, it's the truth.
Yeah, and that's coming from the guy that's number one in a really large market. And just going back to the Navy SEAL analogy, I think that, you know, that's just about doing what it takes to be number one, to be the best, and to be at the top of the field.
Yeah, and listen again. I know I always get hate on this, but I think if balance in your life is what you want, that's great. I'm not saying you shouldn't, if that's not what you want, that's not great. Good for you. But I'm saying you can't be the best at your craft and live a balanced life. It just doesn't exist.
Yeah. Yeah. Fair point. So I want to shift gears a little bit. Obviously, we just had that bombshell NAR lawsuit that kind of went through the industry. So just how have you kind of adjusted and pivoted what you're doing to adapt? Pardon the quick interruption, but if you're looking for a little extra help growing your real estate business, make sure you hit the link in the description below to book a one-on-one consulting session where I will personally help you take your real estate business to the next level. Over the last 15 years, I've grown a brokerage to over 1,000 agents in multiple states, consistently doing over $4 billion a year in sales, and we've been on the Inc. 500 5 times. I would love to personally help you reach your business goals and have the best year you've ever had. Book your session today, and now back to the podcast.
Yeah, I mean, first off, the lawsuit, I think, got it all wrong. What we should have done is made getting the real estate license harder, right? Like, we're the only industry in the world where you could go online and get licensed, and then magically you could sell a $10 million house tomorrow. Like, you can't become a lawyer and then like represent like Kraft in like a big lawsuit and get paid $300 million. So you just can't have that. Okay. So what they should have done is they should have made getting real estate harder. Your license harder. And then when you got your license, I truly believe you shouldn't be able to sell for 4 years without having somebody else do it with you, and then on your 5th year, you can sell on your own. Like, that's how real estate should be, and that's kind of how we run our office here, because like ultimately nobody respects somebody. The reason a lot of people don't respect us as a profession is because people get their license online and then they could have a great network, sell something really big. They're terrible at their jobs. And that's the only experience they have with realtors. And if you think about what happened during the pandemic, I know everybody hates NAR right now, but the reality is NAR did something that it was the greatest thing that happened to us and the worst thing that happened to us. As they gave us the golden ticket, they fought and lobbied for us. So as bad as NAR in some moments, what they did for us is they gave us the golden ticket that we were essential workers and we were able to work. And that was great for us because we were all able to work. But the bad part about that is that so many people got out of the business, or so many other businesses got put out of work, that a lot of people, they're like, well, I don't have a job. I don't have any money. I can get my license online. And then all these people got their real estate license, right? And then all the offices were closed. So now you have these untrained people, and the real estate companies didn't give a shit because they're like, well, if they sell, I get paid. So what's the matter to me, whether they know what they're talking about? And then consumers are meeting agents who don't even know what they're doing for the first time. They're buying a place. They make $50,000. These people are like, I met this person one time. They didn't even know how to write up a contract. And that guy made $50,000. Like, fuck that person, right? And that's what happened, why we're in the boat that we're in. And that was 4 years. And I don't know why the media doesn't talk about that or why that doesn't happen. But when August 17th hit, what that's doing is all those people who had that mentality, that chased the real estate game, they're the same people who chase Bitcoin. They're the ones that are chasing solar panels now, right? The next big hot thing that's going to make me money. Those are those type of people who are now going to be rolling out of the industry. And starting on August 17th, I think although I think the reason behind the lawsuit is terrible. You adapt or you die. All it's doing is cutting the fat. It's like what I talked about earlier. We're cutting the fat. We're going to get rid of, in my opinion, at least 35% of brokers. And those 35% of brokers were all people who got in the last 4 to 5 years and didn't do anything. And what I think is bigger agents like myself and other big agents, our businesses are going to go through the roof, because now what we're seeing is buyers are starting to interview like how sellers did, right? Like, I never understood why a buyer would just show up to a place, meet the first person, then buy a place. Anytime, as a guy who's got the most listings in Chicago as well, like, I know that every time I go on a listing appointment, they're interviewing 3 other people. They always mention it to you too. Like, hey, by the way, I'm interviewing 2 other people. I'm like, great. If you like me, it's me. Like, it's me against me. That's the way I look at it anytime I go on an appointment. I don't give a shit who you're interviewing. It's none of my business. If I don't win, it's because of me. It's not because of anybody else. It's the same thing with buyers now. Buyers are going to start interviewing more. And guess what? We have a 98% success rate when we go on interviews. So, like, I know my business is going to go up. And I also talk about, it's like, I never in my entire career, and I don't know if your office does this, but I would never take a listing without a listing agreement signed, ever, never once. I would never spend all the money in marketing and do all that stuff. But yet I'm carting around buyers, for 19 years of my life with no agreement, and there's an old saying in the book in the 80s, right? Buyers are liars, right? They're out with 10 different agents and they end up buying with somebody else. And I got nothing for all my time because, of course, according to the media, our time is worth 0. So all we're doing now is, you're getting agreements signed and you're proving your value, as you should have done in the first place, to buyers, and buyers can interview harder, which can make bigger agents like us, become even bigger. And last point on that is just the fact that, like, we were always built for this. Like, I've always had a buyer's presentation and I've always had a listing presentation. So before I would ever go out with a buyer, we always had and all my stuff's online. So, before I would go on a listing appointment, like, they would have my listing appointment ahead of time. It's emailed to them over. Okay. It's all interactive, et cetera. So when I come there, it's more like an interaction with an iPad. I pitch you what we got to offer, et cetera. With buyers, it's the same way. We send you our buyer's presentation through email ahead of time. We do a Zoom or a coffee meeting to walk you through what our expectations are, how we operate, what our background is, get to know you a little bit. We talk about, logistics, some terminology you know about, how the process is, the value adds that we have. Okay. So like now people are trying to build these presentations like, fuck, dude, this is just what we've been doing. So like for me, it's like, this is like business as usual. You got to get a document signed and you got to, send an offer compensation when we make offers. But ultimately, our business has only gone up since August 17th.
Yeah, it's a great way to look at it. And I think you make a lot of really good points there too. I also agree that it is way too easy to get a real estate license, and that if they made the barrier to entry higher, we would get, higher caliber people, better training, better folks, and ultimately a better experience for the people buying and selling real estate. And I like what you said there about also just you already have a buyer presentation as well as a listing presentation, which I think is a great way to show value and kind of not just be the door opener for people.
Yeah, I think it's important to make buyers understand what they're getting. And like my system's end to end is unbeatable. Like we have a full-time buyer's assistant that she sets up appointments. She's like pretty much available 24/7, making sure that people can get in when they want to get in. I mean, like, there's a million different things that we offer, but I mean, like, explaining to people what the value they get by working with us compared to anybody else, I think is important. And I'm not saying we're the only ones that do a good job. I think there's a lot of people that do a good job, but I think the problem is that a lot of agents, not all of them, but some of them, took advantage of, hey, I could maybe just meet somebody one time and get a big sale and I'll never follow with them afterwards. And, they think their job is done once you go under contract. And that's a thing I joke around about with, people are like, why do I need an agent? Like, oh, finding place is a third of the project, right? The other third is like getting through, the negotiations and the contract. And the last third is getting closed, right? So like, you may be good at, searching online on Zillow for houses, but like, how do you know which house is better than the next house, right? Like, I mean, kitchens all look alike. A white kitchen with, cool counters is one thing, but like, I've never been to California, and I'm sure there's two neighborhoods by you. And maybe there's a house that's got a better kitchen and is bigger and nicer, but it's cheaper than the house in the subdivision behind it. And I buy the nicer one because that's all I know. But then you're like, oh, did you know that I'm going to a shittier school? And I'm like, oh, I didn't know. I thought it was the same school online. I had no idea. A lot of people are like, oh, I do a lot of research online. I would have known that. I'm sure you would have. But like, I saw downtown Chicago. You can point to two buildings. I can tell you why they're both drastically trade for $1 million difference. Nobody ever knows. And I always ask people this. Do you know why these trade for different rates? Well, I don't. Okay, well, I do. Is that value to you at all? No. So, listen, I don't say it like a jerk. I'm saying like you have to show your value. And I think a lot of buyers, I would say a substantial lot of buyers agents, didn't understand how to articulate their value to their clientels. And I think the people who can show the value that they bring and make it worth the money that they make, I think are going to be just fine and make more. And the people who couldn't show any value, they're in for a problem.
Yeah. And I think also just having that local expertise is what, differentiates a lot of the best agents. Like if you have, to your point, I can look at two buildings that are right next to each other and I know exactly the difference and why they trade at different prices. Having that knowledge is invaluable. And that's what ultimately buyers really want.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, listen, I could, I love that traders are always the ones that hate realtors the most, but I feel like they do the least amount of work and they're the richest people in the world. Okay. They trade other people's money and they make a cut off it. But if I can give you $100,000 and you can turn that $100,000 into $200,000 for me, and you're going to take 2.5% of that, it's better than me taking a chance on something I don't know. Right. And that's a big problem I had with the lawsuits, that the majority of sellers who sued were people who hired people who made them a ton of money on a prop. They made $100,000, and they're mad at the people because they had to pay a little bit of a fee to do it. It's like, if you put your money into a bank account, you do know they're taking money of interest off that every single month. Every month they're taking, so it's like, every industry sucks in the sense that it costs you money, right? Like I hate that every time I go to the doctor, I got to spend a shit ton of money to do it. But like, I also know that like I got to stay healthy, right? So it's like, we can look at this in any ways. And I think that's all the negative ways that people are looking at our thing. And I look at it like, yeah, that all this makes sense. And I hate that this all happened. But ultimately, it happened because people weren't explaining what we were doing as a job. And I do think that because of so much fat came into the industry, it gave us a bad look. And I think the TV shows didn't do us any favors. You're locked in a pandemic, and you see a bunch of girls in $10,000 to $20,000 dresses that are having brunch and talking shit about like other people at the office. And they're like, oh, by the way, I just sold a $300 million house. I got paid $2 million. Oh my God, this is great. Let's get on a yacht. That makes consumers are making the average $55,000 to $60,000 a year, struggling with, paying bills and getting carts of milk at the store, being like, what the hell are these people making this type of money when I'm working 24/7? These people are all at brunch all the time. So I think these TV shows really hurt us as well.
Yeah, no, that's for sure. And I also think it's rather interesting that the lawyer on that whole case is now starting a real estate brokerage.
I mean, it's like the most laugh. I mean, it's like the blind leading the blind here of like what's really happening, and people forget about how much percentage that guy made off the whole deal, then turns around and creates an app to try to take out realtors in general, which will fail. Listen, in the early 90s, they came out with a website called forsalebyowner.com, and everybody said that was going to wipe out real estate agents, right? That, now we don't need realtors more because we can look online. We don't have to depend on their little books. And of course, that system failed as well. Now, the reality is when that happened, it wiped out realtors. In 2001, when the financial crisis of the 01 thing happened, it wiped out realtors. In 06 to 08, it wiped out realtors. All this is, again, it's just regurgitating and getting rid of the fat that came in. And these guys can create whatever they want. It's all laughable. Have them keep creating new technology and bleeding money and pumping it into the economy. That's great.
Yeah. And we'll just keep doing what we're doing over here and leveraging our expertise to help people buy and sell homes.
Right. I mean, don't forget about what was the latest one too. iBuying. I told everybody why iBuying would never last. How well that's working out for every company. That was going to be the wave.
Or iPay1, the 1% listing company.
Yeah. And then people are mad, like, well, I got to do a bunch of work on top of paying the 1%. It's like, okay, well, like, what do you? People don't understand. I think the other problem is that the shows and all this other stuff just show like the money you make, and usually that includes both sides, which is also terrible. And they don't say like, okay, well, like you make $10,000. It's like, okay, depending on your tax bracket, you could lose 42% right away, and then it's like, so now you're down to that. Then you get your split, and then you got to pay like whatever money you put into that, right? And then it's like you're left with that, and it's like you may have worked a year on it, like so. It's like again, it's just I think some parts of real estate is it's a perception problem. People don't articulate what they're doing for you. And I'm not saying you got to send somebody a bill. But I think if you're consistently communicating with people, that's why we do everything through email, especially like on a sell side. Like we do 5 updates a week. So it's like, you're like, what are you doing to sell my property? I'm like, dude, like, I don't know, like this is all this stuff. We're in a hardcore buyer's market in downtown Chicago. Okay. It's like, we have the most inventory of all time above $1 million. So like for everybody out there, everybody wants inventory in our markets. We have so much inventory. We don't, places have been on the market for years. It's all going to be coming to your areas and then we'll get better. But in the meantime, we have years of inventory. And so like when people are like, what are you doing to sell? It's like, here's all the shit. Like every single week we're doing it. And there's print off proof of everything I'm doing every single day. So you can't ever tell me, like, what am I doing? I'm showing you what I'm doing. I always believe actions are more important than words, And it's the same thing.
I couldn't agree more with that actions are more important than words. One thing I want to touch on what you just said there with the 5 updates, but I also heard you say earlier that you guys have a 98% success rate for when you're going out on listing appointments. So what tips can you give us about converting listings?
Well, I mean, first off, it's just when you go on a listing appointment, well, even back it up more, is that we show we're prepared for listing appointments because, again, we send everything ahead of time. So they have everything, they have the comps, etc. One thing I noticed is that most people are very nervous on listing appointments. They're unsure about comps. They're unsure about just like their whole presentation pitch. The average person may go on one listing appointment every couple of weeks, maybe, right?
Right.
And the leg up I have is, I go on at least 7 a week, right? So it's like the more often you're practicing, the better you're going to be than somebody else, right? So like I have that huge advantage over everybody else in the fact that like I just have just such a great routine down on that. So I think, for people out there, you have to make sure that you do your homework on the place that you're walking into, that you have a presentation prepared, and that when you walk into a place, you have a set routine that you're going to go about doing and that you drive the show, right? So when I walk into a place, right, like, I get to know you for a second. I'm like, let's take a look around. I'm very comfortable when I'm into a place as well. So, I do my thing. I see the property. Then I sit down with you and I go over what I call my pitch, right? I have everything on an iPad. I walk you through, who we are, what we have to offer. I always cover commission like first thing, right? Because everybody's like so coy about it. Like, oh, like we'll talk about this later. I'm like, let's get numbers out of the way. Like, here's what I charge. So this way you don't have to like, I almost feel like it's like a bill at the end of the day. Like you're like just waiting for that bill and it creates like more anxiety, right? So I'm like, first things first, like let's talk numbers because I know that's one of the main things you care about, right? Talk about that. And then I lead with that though, because then I'm going to show you all the shit that I'm going to do of why I'm worth when I'm asking, instead of like, because you always remember like your last at bat, right? So if I end with my commission, I'm ending on a sour note. I'm starting with the things that like people perceive as weaknesses because we never want to like talk that we make money. Somehow we all work for free. So I talk about that. I walk you through the market, and nobody can talk about the market better than I can because all I do is sit there and study the market all day. So I'm rattling off stuff. And I'm not showing you stats. I'm not boring you with numbers. I'm telling you like, here's what I'm seeing firsthand, why I think the market's moving where it's going. If you don't believe me, here's video proof that I could refer to of me talking about this 6 months ago that this exact scenario would happen. I do a podcast every week, so the information's there. I walk them through what our marketing's like, and then I always wait to the end and I ask them what they think the place is worth, and then they know like 9 out of 10 people tell me what they think it's worth, and I'll tell them why I think they're right or wrong, and I'll tell them why. And I'm not afraid to tell people what I think. I don't tell people what they want to hear. I always say like, I'll list this place for $10 million. Like I don't give a shit. Like I'll do it. It's not worth it. It won't sell. Like if it's only worth 500,000, like I'm really good at my job. Maybe I can get you 505, but like I can't get you 800. Like it's just not going to happen. Like and the more often you sit, if this place is only worth 500 and you price it wrong, this may only sell for 450, where I could have got you maybe 505. So that costs you 55 grand by doing this wrong, right? Death by 1,000 cuts is a very real problem that happens to listings. So making people understand why their place is worth it and talking through comps. I don't even have to look at it. Like I'm like, I've sold it. I'm like, this going on. This is why it's here, etc. And I think exuberating the confidence, not cockiness, but confidence of how well we know the market is a big thing. And I think also we put home our systems. Our systems are second to none. Like when I say I have 4 assistants, like my assistants are assistants. Like they're in the office. They're not, junior agents that put up lock boxes that also do listing agreements. Like I have somebody set for each thing. So, most people want information. They want it now. They don't want to wait. Okay. They want it done right away. So what we do is like, I have people for each thing. Like I have one person that just preps listings. She's your listing concierge. She'll prep your, help you get painters, movers, stagers, whatever. Everything's done for you. Right. I have another person who just sets up showings for our sellers. Everything's set up for them. It's a real person, not calling in a Comcast where you can't get a hold of anybody. It's somebody you can talk to right away if you're going to move things around, etc. We go under contract. I have a full-time transaction coordinator that follows up with you twice a week. That's got a checklist that does everything for you. She does like literally everything. You never have to do anything yourself. Like everything is done. Shutting off gas, shutting off electric, she's doing whatever. Everything is done for you. I walk them through all that too with the process. So when we're done, people aren't asking like, like what more can you do? People are like, this is like, it's kind of a lot. And like, you only charge what? I'm like, yeah. I'm like, that's what we get. And like people, I tell you a lot of times, like people offer me more money. And I'm like, I don't want any more. I don't want any less. Like this is what I have.
That's amazing. Yeah, that's a great pitch, and I love the way that you're presenting it. I like the way that you get the commissions out of the way up front. I'm curious when you're presenting the, how much do you think it's worth? I think we all know that most people, when they're selling, they think their place is worth more than what it is, and when someone's buying, they think it's worth less than what it is. So how do you just have that conversation when someone, let's say, thinks their place is worth 650 and you think it's worth 500 or 600 or 550?
Yeah, I mean, like every now and then somebody's like crazy on it. And, you know, I think out of that scenario, there's always gonna be 1 out of 10 people who are just completely unrealistic, you know, like just completely unrealistic. And in my market, we deal with a lot of people who have to sell for a big loss. Okay. So prices are down on average about 35% since the pandemic in some parts of the city. Okay. So like, you know, I'm sure there's not many people who are taking $1 million haircut today. Okay. In California. Okay. And bought it in 2019. Like that's like unheard of. But, you know, a lot of people, yeah, we have to sit down and like, hey, I know you paid $650 for this in 2018 and you read in the news that everybody's, you know, places are up 100%, but the reality is the place is worth $550 today. Your neighbor directly below you, the same exact unit, same footprint, sold for $550. How in the world are you worth $650? Like in Chicago, unlike Miami and New York and like California, people look at comps. We're the Midwest mentality, okay? Like money matters here. You know, people aren't, not everybody's FU loaded. So if you think you're going to get $100,000 more than the last comp, then I'm telling you right now, like it's just not going to happen. And I tell people, like, you know, I always feel like I'm a doctor delivering cancer news to some people. It's like, listen, like I can't change the diagnosis. Like I can't. Like I want to sell it for 100,000 more too, because they'll make more money. But if you're not willing to be even somewhat realistic for it, like I also, you know, time is money, right? So like my time's worth something, and I pass on a lot of listings like that. You know, that's why there's a large. When I say 98% success rate, that's like when I go and I want it. There are a lot of listings I go and I don't want to take. I'm like, it's just not worth my time. And I'll tell you, most of the time when I pass on it, if it's like that crazy off on price, like $100,000 gap, we end up getting it back like a year later. So somebody else works it for a year. They finally get realistic. I get the call. They're like, hey, we knew what you said. You're a little rough about it when you said it, kind of straight shooting. I didn't want to hear it. And somebody else, 2 other people told us what we want to hear. That's a big thing because every realtor tells you whatever you want to hear. The other guy told us this, you know, and I always tell people like, listen, people are going to tell you whatever you want to hear. And they'll be like, do you want to know who said it? I'm like, I don't give a shit who said it. I'm like Jesus Christ could have came down here and told you yourself. Like, I don't care. Like, all I can tell you is like, I can't change the numbers. Like I sold all the other units in the building. I can't change it. These numbers don't change with me or Jesus. Like, it doesn't matter. Like I can't turn 550 to 650 tomorrow. It just can't happen. So, you know, when people will come back and say, you were the only one that actually told us to us like that. And now we're ready to sell and we're going to give it to you at X price. And then we sell. So I'm not saying we underprice things by any means. I mean, I break records every day of the week. I'm saying like, I can't make something go up $100,000 in Chicago. Like it just doesn't work like that.
Yeah. Yeah. The numbers kind of are what they are, like you said. Cool. Well, as we start to wrap up here, I'd be curious what your advice would be to some of the newer agents out there, or someone just trying to get to that next level. What would you advise them to do?
I would say that they, you know, like Rome wasn't built overnight, you know, and that, you know, you're going to get out of this business what you're going to put into it and go into the first 4 years and know that you're going to make $0 and just understand and live with the reality that you're going to make nothing for the first 4 years, because everybody just chases money. All they want is money. That's it. That's all they ever think about. How much money can I make? What's my GCI coming back? Like, how am I going to make this? Like, I think, and people ask me all the time, like, what my GCI is. I'm like, I don't care. It's meaningless to me. I don't even look at it. All I care about is being the best at my job, and the money will come. Money will come later. If you're good enough at your job, people will seek you, right? Like if you know, baseball season's coming up, right? If you could get Aaron Judge, you're not asking what he costs. You're just like, if I could get him, like I'm gonna get him. You know what I mean? Like it just, that's just how like life works. So if you become an expert, people will seek you out, and the more people seek you out, guess what? The more money you'll make. But like if you think about it on how much money you're gonna make, that's gonna be the biggest recipe to failure. And I think that's the biggest problem that younger agents have, is all they think about is money. That's it. And that's a lot of the younger ones I'll talk to. But I can tell you is that the main thing that you should do is your first 4 years, go work for the best person or top 10 person in your city that you're in, and actually study the market. Sit in the office every single day. That's what I did for my first 4 years. I sat in the office, heard how my dad talked, how he said things, why he said certain things. I'd ask questions why they did this, and just understand stuff, so that when people ask you your opinion on it, you can actually give them an opinion instead of just like, and if you do it that way, like it's a very easy way to win, because 90% of agents have the opposite mentality. So to become a top 10% realtor is honestly, I think it's probably the easiest feat there is. Even to become the top 1%, which is top like 250 in your market. Like if you look at the top 250, like number 250, 249, like that's a weekend of sales for a big producer. Like, that's how you get there.
Love that. Yeah. Couldn't agree more. And I love what you said about just spending the time up front. Finding the mentor is basically the same thing as getting on a good team with someone that's producing at a high volume, and really kind of like learning the market, going to the neighborhoods, walking around like you did when you were first learning the game, and just really understanding the product, the neighborhoods, and what you're selling.
Yep.
So very cool. And then last question is, in 60 seconds or less, what does it take to be a massively successful realtor?
I think that the biggest thing that you could think about is becoming really determined on what your goal is and then getting laser focused on that. And when you understand where you want to go and how you want to get there, and you could visualize yourself getting there, you set a routine and there's no stopping. And that's it. It's that simple. I don't even need 60 seconds. Just use those three: determinations, focused, and a set routine, and you can conquer the world.
Love that. Well, Matt, I certainly appreciate you coming on today. Again, for all those listening, make sure you check out the links in the description. And if you like money and you like real estate, hit that subscribe button, and we'll see you on the next one. Thanks a lot, Matt.
Thank you.